Welcome to Let's Grab a Cup podcast. This is where we talk about leadership, authenticity, resiliency, and we provide a place to hold space for one another. I'm your host, Adam Sturgeon. So why don't you grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever suits you at this moment. Let's dive in. Well, hello, I am Adam Sturgeon, and this is the Let's Grab a Cup podcast. Today I'll be talking to Carlos Lozoya. Carlos is in Arizona, and he's has a company called Milagro Metalworks, where he does makes metal signs. But before that, Carlos was a U.S. Border Patrol agent, starting his career in Southern California and doing 25 years, where he actually moved over to Arizona and did finish out his career there. So, good morning, Carlos. How are you doing?
Good morning, man. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. So I got to know, I kind of met you through Instagram. I mean, I saw that you're doing all these signs and started talking to you, and I thought it was really cool. So thank you for I don't have it up today because I don't have the good wall behind me. This is all fake, but that sign is pretty cool. I need to get some studs and hang it up. So
right on, man.
So we kind of had a little snafu this morning because time zone situation, like
right.
Arizona doesn't change time zones, apparently.
That's right, baby. Go Arizona.
And I'm still in California. So let's start off with where you grew up. So you're in Arizona now, but where did you grow up and how did you end up in law enforcement?
I grew up in Northern California, in the San Joaquin Valley. I grew up in a small town called Dixon, California. I tell people that people have no idea where that is. It's the best I can give you is like UC Davis is basically right down the road from where I grew up. And then the Bay Area is about an hour away. So that's kind of where I grew up. Getting into law enforcement, well, that's kind of an interesting story. I had to think about it for a second here. It's got multiple paths to it. I remember I was growing up as a kid, I was a big Chips, just like diehard. I mean, Poncherello and Baker, I just watched them on their bikes and do all this crazy stuff. And I was like, oh, that's what I want to do one day. I want to be a highway patrol. I want to be in law enforcement one day. And yeah, so that's kind of like how that seed got planted. And then
was that show on when you were a kid?
Yeah. So I got to see that growing up. That's what I got to see. And then my godfather was in law enforcement. He was a sheriff. Okay. And I remember as a little kid, he came over the house in his uniform one time, and I guess my mom says I was just tall enough to like reach the bottom of the barrel of his revolver, like in his uniform. I was like pointing it up with my finger. I said, "What's this for?" And he was like, "How do you tell a little kid?" Like I don't even know how old I was, but he's like, "Oh, it's to kill the coyotes." And
oh, really?
That kind of like sunk in my head, So that's kind of like.
That's kind of interesting. Coyotes, right? Because isn't that what Border Patrol go after the coyotes?
Yes. And he actually baptized me. In my baptism, and I grew up Catholic, and so he baptized me. And it's funny, I wrote a piece like I can't find it, but it was on Facebook years ago, and I wrote like a little thing like I said, the irony of the person who's baptizing me would be the person that also had such a huge impact on me, like wanting to get into law enforcement. And I saw him as a source of like, authority and like a great role model, and something like, commanded all the respect when he'd walk in. It was just something, and left me in awe being a little kid. And I said, that's exactly what I want to do.
That's cool. And so he was a sheriff, you said?
Yeah.
Was it in Dixon or somewhere else?
No, I want to say it. Gosh, I should know exactly where he was, but I think it's Yolo County, I think is the name of like the area that he was patrolled.
Did he ever like tell you stories about like what's like real stories, or was it all?
No, I never really got a chance to ask him. He was very easygoing, like very laid back, and I don't know. He just, when I stopped to think about it, as he didn't fit like your classic like mold when you think of somebody in law enforcement, but I don't know, he was just a great person and just very like easygoing. And I said, that's exactly. And then they ended up at one point they owned a Mexican restaurant in our town. Okay. And of course, being their godson, I got to eat for free like all the time I went in there. And my godmother, she's amazing. And she would always she's just the nicest person ever in the world, man. I love her. And if she sees this, thank you so much for everything.
That's great. That's cool. So
Yeah.
how old were you during this age? Like when he was talking about the gun, like the pistol and stuff like that?
Gosh, I think you know, if I could barely beat the barrel of his gun, I mean, I probably had to be like less than like maybe like around 8 or between 5 and 8, I think,
Yeah.
you know.
And so you grew up in this area in Dixon? Like, is that where you grew
Yes.
up till you
Yeah,
were?
it's basically most people know it as the San Joaquin Valley. Basically, that area is just very agricultural. Like, I mean, that's all it is. It's very a lot of migrants were moving there at that time and working in like the tomato fields, wheat, corn. From that, the San Joaquin area starts from like Sacramento area all the way down to like Bakersfield. Like all of that area is considered like, some people call it, the breadbasket, or just it's the agricultural, mecca, if you will. So that's what my dad did. Like, it's what my dad and my mom worked in the fields as, laborers, basically, our whole life, and when tomato season would start, I wouldn't see my dad for like 3.5 months. Like I would, he would
Really?
come home, but back then there wasn't a whole lot of like regulations on how much you could work as far as in a semi truck. So he would work like what he had to work, which was, God, 14, 16 hours a day. And I would see him like just kind of come home. My mom would make him dinner. I'd see him in the evening, and then he'd leave like at 3 in the morning, like, and he'd have to drive, like he'd have to load up in town. And we had a local Campbell's factory. So they would either go down to Bakersfield, pick up a load, come back, dump it at the Campbell soup factory there in our town, and then have to make that run again, depending on how long it took. So they would do that for like 4 months. My mom worked at the canning factory where he was, making that. So during that time, during tomato season, it was rough. It was brutal in our house. Like, we had to kind of fend for ourselves really, really young.
Did you have older siblings or younger
I
siblings?
do. I have 3 older brothers, an older sister, and myself, and then I have a baby brother. I call him my baby brother, but he's about 15 years younger than me. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, my mom and my dad call that a slip. So,
I was gonna say that. Like, don't tell me it was an accident.
yeah, yeah.
That's
So
funny. So
it's
was it?
crazy though.
Go ahead.
It's crazy though because like, when I was growing up, like none of our family was in law enforcement. You could say that a big percentage of our contact with law enforcement was not very good. I'll say that loosely. Like it was just a rough area where we grew up, and the police wasn't really like you looked upon. Well, not by my older brothers, but my parents respected law enforcement. My dad, was very law abiding, and he always, told me like, hey, if you ever if you come into contact with somebody that's in law enforcement, like, hey, you do exactly what they say. You don't ask any questions, and I don't want to hear of you being in any kind of trouble. And that kind of really stuck with me, that my dad, told me that. So,
Did you say your brothers had some issues? Did they have any issues with the law?
oh yeah, man, like,
Really?
man, my middle oldest brother was in and out of prison like from the age of probably like 16 to like in like his late 30s or 40s. Like, I mean, we're talking like heavy prisons, like,
Really?
Soledad, Tracy. I think he was like one step away from like going to San Quentin for a long time. I mean, it just, and all of those things were, you meet anybody that meets him to date, like he totally turned his life around, like, but it took a lot to get there. But when we were growing up, if you talk to anybody and say, hey, so and so's brother, and he'd be like, yeah, he's a great guy, and then that's all you would hear is he's a great guy. But what would happen is, like, there was substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and as soon as those things kicked in, that's when all his trouble would start. And not just him, my other brothers too as well, and so I saw that, and my mom just like scared like the living, like, crap out of me, like, to not don't follow in those footsteps, like make sure that you don't get in any kind of trouble. And she went overboard. My mom was brutally hard on me and my sister, man. We're talking like she would whip, like, uh, anything that I would do wrong, man. I'd get the belt, I'd get a chancla, which is like a flip flop, light, the lamp cord. I mean, you name it, fly
Jeez.
swatter, man. Like, it didn't matter. I told her, I make fun of it now. I make light of it now. And I told somebody, it's like, dude, my mom beat the brown off my butt, man. I go literally like, and I remember someone asked me one time, like a while back, and they said, do you ever resent your mom for being so hard on you? And I said, no, not at all. I called her up on the phone, like after they asked me that, and they were like in the room. And I said, hey mom, how you doing? She's like, oh, nothing, we're talking in Spanish. And I said, hey, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for whipping me and being so hard on me and getting down on me and just like really pushing me like relentlessly. I said, because I wouldn't be where I am without you doing that.
Right.
And I don't know if I think that's a hard thing for people to grasp, like nowadays. Like, I think people don't understand like that having very strong upbringing like that, like prepares you for like a lot of a lot of things that you're going to come up with.
I was wondering if you're gonna like, I was kind of curious about that as far as like the idea of parents, in that age were treating their kids differently than we're treating our children. And are you
Yeah,
seeing a different, even like with your kids, are you seeing a difference in like how they behave and which like you're like, I wonder if it would be different if you were to, be stricter or harder or whatever. I don't know if you're strict with your kids or not, but
I've been accused of being sometimes too hard. And I always go back to like talking to my daughter who's 14 and my son who's 7. I always say, like, you guys wouldn't survive one day in my life as a kid. I said, you guys have no idea like how easy and how good you have it.
right.
And case in point, like, I've had people come over. I've dated people that had, a similar age kid, and this kid was like completely disrespectful to his parent, telling him that he hated them, that he wished that they were never alive. And I'm just like, I'd have to walk out. I'd have to walk out. I could not hear that. I'm just like, I'd walk back in and I'd say, if I said that, I'd say it in private to the parent. I'd be like, if I ever said that to my mom, I go, my mom would have knocked the teeth out of my mouth. I go, not even, no questions. She would have hugged me afterwards, but I can guarantee you she would have beat me down for doing that. And
Yeah.
I said, people nowadays think that kids, need to be like, I hear this term a lot, like, oh, they need to have their voice and they need to like express this. I get it. I get that to some extent. Like, I definitely am a hybrid. I don't think that I'm as hard as my mom was, but that parent that had that kid would tell me, your kids are wonderful. They're the most beautiful human beings on the planet. And I said, you know why? I said, because I am not afraid to get my hands dirty. I'll go in there. Like, my son was defiant for just a short period where I had to spank him. And I was hard on him. And people that would see that would be like, question me, like, hey, that's probably a little excessive. And I go, that's nothing. That's nothing compared to what I went through. And my daughter too. Like, I've been tough on her. And I tell her, I said, hey, I'm not going to be here forever. Like, at some point you're going to have a person that's going to confront you, want to take advantage of you or push you around. I go, you have to stand up for yourself. So that's kind of like, that's my mindset. And
Yeah, you're
so
trying to
far,
build strong kids.
I for sure,
Yeah, and respectful, and you want them to be respectful. And I think that's my biggest issue. Like my kids, I know the same thing. Like they're very respectful when it comes to like other adults.
yeah,
They're, and which I'm glad. And I think that has to do
right,
with the fact that we keep, we honestly we keep pushing it on them. Like, hey, please and thank you. Like we're obviously like putting our emphasis on that. And but then sometimes in the house, it's the same thing. I'm like, what are you doing? Like you don't talk to your mom that way. Like we don't.
yeah,
It's not how we speak to each other. Like what are you talking about? And I've seen the same thing you said. Like other kids where I'm like, what is going on? And where I've said something to those kids, I'm like, don't talk to your dad like that or whatever.
yeah,
And, and like, and I've had someone like some of my close friends or people have said to me, like, can you come over? Can you come over more often? Like joke, because can you take care of that kid? Like whatever. And just because I'm like, what are you doing? And I don't know. I don't know what it is about. Like, I understand that the corporal punishment part of it that we
yeah,
changed, which is fine. I'm not into like hitting my kids or anything, but the idea of
right.
like, hey, you can still be strict,
Oh yeah,
still be strict. And if I say like, this is the punishment, like this is all gone. Like you guys aren't
yeah,
getting this, you're not doing this, whatever it is, like that's the punishment. And I kind of jump to I jumped to like the nth
Yeah.
degree. Like I think we were going to Disneyland one time and I was like, we're not going to Disneyland anymore. And then I'm like, oh shoot, man, I still wanted to go.
Yeah. I do that too sometimes. Like I'll like draw a line that I have to like go back and like erase myself, because I'll just like I'll lose it sometimes. But like my son, I haven't had, thank God I haven't had to spank my son in a couple of years now. But like, but when I would, like I'd go to my room and like cool off and just sit there. I mean, God, like I'm like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with this kid? Like, I don't understand. I go, they have it so easy. I don't know why he thinks he can, say these things or do these things. And then he would come in, he would come in with his head down, like walk into the room. He'd let himself out of his room and stuff, and his door would be closed. And he'd like, Daddy, I just want to say that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for acting like a bad boy and not listening to you. And I could hear him acknowledging like that he was being bad. And that's, I think, ultimately like what I want. Like, is like, hey man, there's consequences to acting a fool or doing something that you're told not to do. And then, I wouldn't just be hard. He would crush me, man. He'd crush me inside because, he's so little and admitting that he's done wrong. And then I give him a big hug and, like my voice would crack because I'm telling him like, hey, I love you very much. He's like, I'm doing this because I love you, because I want you to be a good person. And, and I give him a big hug and I said, okay, I said, I don't want to have to do that. I said, I want you to be a good person. I said, and you can do it. I said, you're a good kid. And, he's been an amazing little boy, man. He's taught me a lot about myself too. Like I see a lot of my, very, very young self in him. So when I do that, I kind of like not be as hard on him and kind of be more understanding.
Yeah.
So
That's good, man. I like that. Especially I like the connection with my kids. Like I can't, every time I call, if I call my wife and my kid answers, I'm like, it melts me immediately because I'm not expecting a little voice and I'm like, oh, a little kid.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So,
the best. It's the
I know.
best, man.
So I was wondering, your brothers were older, like they didn't have the same, almost like a different upbringing. It sounds like they weren't
They
getting
did.
this.
So to give you a little bit background, and this I think played a big part in how they grew up. So my dad was previously married. So those three older brothers are, my stepbrothers. So their mom passed away. I think she died of cancer, and
Oh
then
wow.
my mom and dad met, and then we were in addition to the family. Then they combined two families, and I think that not having their mom in their life, and then my dad, at that point in his life, he drank like he was a severe alcoholic, and my mom was too. Just I think that's tends to be very what's the word I'm looking for? Like you see it a lot in like very like low income areas. I mean,
Okay.
so I think that you're working endless hours. You know how it is when in life that some of the biggest disagreements are going to be about money, finances. When you can't make the bills,
Right.
and they were killing themselves. I mean, they were out and working, making nothing. Like I remember I looked at one of my dad's pay stubs and my mom's, and I think my mom was making like 325 an hour, and my dad was making like six something, like $6-7. And I'm like, and when I looked at that, I saw it pay stubs. I mean, I think they got rid of them, but I was in their filing cabinet like years ago and I found it. And that really like sunk in my head. I said, how did you do it, mom? Like,
Right.
how did you like, she's like, well, I had no choice. I had to figure out how to do it. She's like, you guys, I would make a lot of beans, flour tortillas, and things that were very low cost to
Right.
make. And
Yeah.
that's how we did it, and we got by. And but it also gave me like appreciation for their struggle. And I think if you don't teach your kids like that, those things, you're going to have an adult that doesn't know how to appreciate like the journey that that what it took to get him there. Like if like I bought a house now where I live, I'm retired, and like thanks to my dad and my mom, like the first thing I did when my dad got here is we walked to the backyard, and I said, I know this house is in my name. I said, but this is just as much your house as it is mine. I said, because of everything that you did to get me here. I said, and my mom, and as hard as my mom was on me, like she kept me out of trouble, kept pushing me. And I said, so this is ours. This dream here, this is ours. This isn't mine. And I think that's big for parents because, you work forever And I think that's ultimately what you want, is you want your kids to appreciate, like, what you've done for them. And that's what I do for my parents all the time. Like my dad, like if you were to ask me point blank who my hero is, he's my dad. My dad is, my dad had a very almost no education, one of the smartest people I know on the planet. Like mechanically, he can do anything. Like he used to be a heavy machinery mechanic. He could weld, he could drive any type of like farm equipment, combines, anything. Just he could do anything. There's nothing he can't do. Like,
Right.
and all of that, to me is like, that's like a man's man. Like to me, like when I see him, I ask him something, and he's like, oh, he'll like, he puts his hat up like this, and then he has a Pepsi, and like he's like, oh, that's easy, man. He's like, oh, just go get this, and we'll make it happen. He goes, he like take a drink, and I could be struggling like putting something together like mechanically on a car, like a certain bolt pattern, and he'll walk over and he goes, and he used to piss me off so much when I was a kid, like in my teens. He'd be like, he'd walk over and he's like, look over like what I'm doing. He's like, are you done playing? Are you done playing so I can get in there? And, oh man, I'd go like, I'd get so mad. And I was like, he'd go in there, and like in like 2 seconds, he'd tell me, he's like, he'd show me right away how to do it right. I'm like, God, I go, how do you know how to do that? He goes, we have no choice back then but to figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And I realized that, like there's definitely a big,
Different. Yeah.
change difference, so.
There's YouTube and Google, huh?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what I tell him.
I know. You just
He
like, how do you
makes
do
fun.
it?
He makes fun of that too. He'll be like, "Oh, but go," because he'll use a little bit of like English, but predominantly we only speak in Spanish. And he's like, "Oh, and YouTube, like YouTube it." And he's like, "Go YouTube it," and I'm like, and we just laugh. My daughter too. Like my daughter laughs too,
Uh,
and he has a. My dad's so patient, man. My dad has the patience of a saint, man. Like, he took us fishing. I mean, those are the most memorable things that I remember, like with my dad, is like either working on cars with him or him taking me to his shop. Because if he saw me with like idle time, he'd be like, he's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, nothing. I'm gonna go like hang with my friends. Like, no, we got stuff to do. And he realized that idle time is just, you're asking to get in trouble,
yeah.
and he would take me to his shop, and we would like, you're gonna wash the front cab of the truck. Shoot, that thing would take like hours to wash, so there was our whole day. But I realized that like what he was doing was like giving, like trying to give me purpose, and just keeping me busy with him. And man, I hated it, all the stuff that he would try to show me at first. But I've met people that are like, how do you know how to do all this stuff? And I said, well, I've had a lot of random jobs. I said, like real sucky jobs. I said, I used to change tires as a kid, like in a farm shop. I go, that was like backbreaking. I laid masonry brick, because my parents were like, there was no like summer breaks, man. My parents were like, hey,
You're
if
working.
once you're out of, yeah, you're working, man. You're
Yeah.
gonna go work. You'll go work with so and so's friend or whatever. We were out there, man. And my mom, she took me and my sister, like, when I don't know what age we were, but we had to be like maybe junior high, or just that, when your kids start to get to that attitude stage, and my mom goes, okay, we're gonna go work in the fields. And my mom took me and my sister, like it's like 108 degrees, like out in like a dirt field with these hoes, and you have to be very precise on how you strike these tomato plants. And my mom took us out there, and it took like hours to get to like one end to the other end. And man, after like 3 days, my mom goes, this is what you have to look forward to. Like, if you don't go to school, you don't get a good job. It's like, this is where you'll be. And I know I get that it sounds like she was putting herself down, but I think she was definitely like driving us to be more.
Yeah, no, and I don't think she's putting herself down. I think it's almost like, because you always want better for your kids. I mean, sure,
Yeah.
even you, like, I'm sure you look at it and be like, hey, you could. I don't even know if you'd want to push your kids towards law enforcement these days, but
Yeah.
like you always want something better for your children. I think that's what
Yeah.
you're trying to do, and taking care of you guys. I mean, and also kind of showing like, hey, she's working her ass off, so show some respect. Show some
Yeah.
respect.
It's true.
That's crazy. So when you were growing up, like I know you said you as a kid, like you had that like kind of like first inkling with like the law enforcement stuff, like seeing your godfather. But then
Yeah.
did it continue? Like, did you continue to see that positive thing, or did it switch? Did you change your mind? How did you come back to like deciding on border patrol?
Um, that's it. I'd have to rewind a little bit. So when my upbringing was a very volatile one. A lot of domestic violence, alcohol. I mean, it was brutal. I mean, I still have scars from it to this day that I've had to go and get, go to counseling for, and things that have like cost me in relationships that I didn't realize, things that had happened in our home at such a young age, like affected me all the way through. And the way when I stopped to think about how did I really get into law enforcement, I correlated like my father, or my godfather showing up in a very volatile fight in our house. It was a huge, one of our big fights. And I don't know how he showed up. I don't know who called him or what, but he showed up. And, my parents had just got done like getting into it, man, like physically, like getting into it. And he showed up, and I saw the respect that my dad had for him, and my mom kind of just quietly sitting down in like the sofa. And I kind of like put two and two together. I said, hey, when this man in this uniform shows up with this shiny badge and gun, like, people act differently around him. And I said, and that's what I want. I said, I want to do that. I want to be that type of person, because as a kid, I had no control in my life. Like everything in my life was a complete wreck, up until like, I was 10. My mom and dad split up, and my mom, I guess had enough with my dad, and she put us on a Greyhound with her to Chihuahua, Mexico. And she, hours and hours on the bus, and my dad shows up in Chihuahua, Mexico, like I don't know how many, days later or whatever had passed, but he was trying to like, reconcile with my mom, and telling her to come back. And then my mom said, hey, you know what, I'm willing to let this, but I'm going to leave it up to the kids to decide. And my dad went to my sister and asked, do you want to like me to come back, or do you want to come back with me to live? And my sister said yes. And then so everything fell on my shoulders. And then he asked me like, do you want me to come back? And I said, I don't want to see you ever again in my life ever again. I said, I never want to see you. If you're going to continue to drink, I never want to see you ever in my life. I never want anything to do with you. And that's what, like, I told him that. And, gosh, so we ended up coming back to California where
That's heavy.
our home
Heavy,
was.
dude. Confronting your dad like that. That's, I mean,
Yeah. I was 10. I was 10 years old telling him that. And then, so fast forward, like, I don't know, like I'm 40 years old, and I had forgot about that whole situation. And my aunt, my dad's sister was like washing dishes. We were at a party, and she goes, do you know why your dad doesn't drink? And I said, what? I was already like a grown man already. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, yeah, do you know why your dad doesn't drink? And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, because of you. He goes, your dad stopped drinking the day that you told him that you never wanted to see him again. And if he was going to drink, and he did. My dad stopped cold turkey. Like when we went back to California, my dad never picked up another beer ever again. And that's what I admired so much about my dad, is like his willpower. Like, like not everyone can do it. I understand that, but I also have become hardened by that. Like watching my dad do, like if he really wanted it, he could do it. And that's my dad's mentality. Like, unfortunately, my dad is like from a very old school era. Like when we're driving somewhere, like my dad will be with me, and like we'll see someone like begging for money, and like if they're physically like fit and like they look good, my dad goes, that's no excuse. There's no excuse for that. He goes, you all have decisions. You always have a choice to do something. And their story about how they came to the United States, or came to be like in Dixon, California, is a crazy one. Like he told me, yeah, me and your uncle got on a train headed to Sacramento out of El Paso, Texas. And they jumped the train, and they were working at a refinery there in El Paso, Texas. So they jump on a train, they end up in Sacramento. They walk up to they find their way somehow to the unemployment office in Sacramento. And I think he was Korean or Chinese guy, rolls up in a big work truck, and my dad and my uncle are sitting on the sidewalk, or waiting, like trying to figure out how this whole thing works. And he says, hey, you guys know how to like pick asparagus? I said, my dad goes, I'd never seen an asparagus in my life. And I said, sure, we know exactly how to do that, And him and my uncle jump in the truck with the foreman. They drive all the way to this area called Rio Vista, and in this area there was like a subdivision or like a migrant camp. It was called Liberty Farms, or yeah, Liberty Farms, or Liberty Island, and it doesn't exist anymore. There's only like just like a few standing like wood shacks left of there. But that's where they went. Like, so they went there, and that's where like all the Mexican families in our town in Dixon, a lot of them were established from that migrant camp there in Liberty Island, and it was picking asparagus. And we're talking like brutal work. Like my dad says, if you were slow, you worked twice as hard, because you had to pick up the bushel of asparagus of the person that was in front of you on the opposite row. They would put it into your row, and you had to keep flipping it to your left. So
Really?
if you were slow, then you had to do twice as much, because you had to flip yours and someone else's. And so it was like back-breaking work. Like all my family, that's how they started, like, that they were
Yeah.
killing themselves out there. And that's kind of how they became to be.
That's crazy. I want to go back real quick and say, like, the story you said, you kind of, and then you jumped into the next story about how they got here, but that impact that you had as a child on your dad, that's really powerful. Like, anyone like listens to this, like, I mean, I think I had like chills when you said that, like, about your dad, like decide not to drink based on what like you said as a kid, but it's really powerful. I think they recognize that. Like, I'm sure you have maybe thought about it a few times, but just to recognize the impact you had on your dad, because, and it also makes me think about how much influence we have on what our kids see, what we do, and
Right.
what they're actually feeling. And, at this age, a young age, like what they're feeling and the impact we're having on them. So I just want to bring it back to that real quick, because that's a really powerful story, man. So
Yeah, thank you. Like, it's something that, like, even I can even notice like my eye like water up still thinking about it, because it was something like, our family was going to completely explode. Like this one moment like came down, and then I, being put, and I'm sure people will listen and be like, oh, a little kid should never be put in that position. Well, sometimes you don't have a choice. You got to make a decision, and hard times definitely make strong people. I feel that a lot of the things that I had to endure made me strong-willed, very opinionated, like able to like overcome adversity, like all those things. And I think, and having my dad, and not only that, but and then having my dad, like when I said that to my dad, and then my dad living up to that and saying, okay, I see where I'm messing up. Like, I know I'm about to lose like my kids. I'm not going to do that. And and that's one thing that my mom, even to the date, like sometimes we'll have talks out on the patio, and I'll say like, you guys went through a lot. Like I said, what at the, when you were leaving, or when you decided to get back, what was it exactly that like why would you stay with my dad? And they said, she's like, first and foremost, your dad is a extremely hard worker. Your dad, like, even if you woke up hungover or drunk, he goes, your dad never missed work. He would get up and go to work every day. He goes, the second thing she said was that he loved you guys like so much. Like he loves his kids, like with there's no limit to what he loves his kids. And
right.
my dad's not one of those men that say, I don't think my dad ever told me I love you ever in my life, maybe like once or twice. And um he's not a guy that talks about his feelings. He's just not that type. But in contrast, like, when I was playing football in high school, and I'd ask him like, hey dad, I need a pair of shoes, like I need a new pair of like soccer, football shoes. My dad would find a way, like it wasn't in our budget. It wasn't in our budget to buy those shoes. And my dad would find a way to get it. And then he's like, hey, I got you these. And that like would like just crush me. Like I had so much respect for my dad. Like when he would do things like that, and they were so small, but yet so important to me.
Right.
And I knew where we were financially. So all of that meant a lot.
Did you,
So,
yeah, you recognize that at that time, like financially, like where your family was?
yeah, and it was just one of those things. Like my mom, she would give us like, they were able to give us the bare minimum. I mean, that's it. Like, I mean, just barely making it, surviving. And then if you wanted something more, like you had to get a job, you had to get out and
Yeah.
work for it. And I think that's when things really start to change, for not just for myself, but I think for people. If you have to work really hard for something, like you're going to take really good care of it, man. Like, when my dad, like when I was starting to get just old enough to drive, my dad got a car from his boss. It had a blown motor in it. And my dad goes, I'll fix it. I'll fix it for you. And then, and you'll drive it. And he ended up fixing the car for me, and I helped him. And so that like had such a lasting impact on me. My dad has always showed his love by actions. My dad does things for you to show you that he loves you. And that's what I admire about my dad.
I mean, I think that's important to know too, like how people show their love or their feelings towards you. Cause we always say, well, my dad, like you said, my dad didn't say he loved me, but this is how he shows he cares. And even now today, maybe, I mean, I don't know if he says he loves you, but like but if he gives you or something, if it's a gift giving kind of thing,
Yeah.
like that's the way that he shows it, or the way that your mom maybe show you, the way she loves you, and the way you show your kids. It's all like, learn and internal and all these different things. So I think it's
That's
important.
funny because like when my son was being really difficult, like my mom would be visiting, and I said, hey, what happened to the lady that would like whip the brown off someone's ass? And she would be like, oh, I'm too old for that now. I mean, plus he's like, it's a different time now. And she would just kind of like be very like calm and modest about it. And I'm like, oh, these kids wouldn't last one day in my life as and she would just kind of laugh and but you know what? But one thing that was never a doubt in my mind is how much I knew my mom loved me. Like I knew that, like I tell her this all the time, every chance I get. Like it's crazy. Like I'll call her up and she's just like, she probably thinks like, you're losing your mind, or like, why are you calling me randomly to tell me that, and I said, I appreciate the hard times. Like I do. I said, sometimes I'll just find myself like working in my shop, like, and I'll look around at all the tools that I have. And that was one thing that my dad told me at a very young age. Like, man, we'd be out there working on a car with like a little small box of tools that my dad had, and he could do anything with that box of tools. And I just like, he said, when you get older, he goes, one thing that's a great investment is tools. Like tools never lose their value, and they always make a job easier.
Right.
And it's something that really like burned in my head. I mean, I must have been like 14, and I mean, I bought like every chance I get. Like if I need it, even if it's just a one job, I go out and like buy the tool. And I don't just buy like just a tool. I'm like, which one is the best? And that's like, oh, this one. So I go and get it, and I have like this amazing like route I bought. Like I think I've used it like 3 or 4 times, but it's like the best one. And I was like, yeah, like, and I don't know, all that stuff just kind of like sunk in my head, man. Because my dad just did so many cool things with all the tools. Like he used to have like this, like he had a little bit of tissue in his toolbox, and I was like, what is that? Like, what do you have tissue in your toolbox for? And one day we were changing the spark plugs like on my car, and then he's like, oh, we got to do something else. So, no, we weren't changing the plug, we were going to do something else, but we needed to put the motor what's called top dead center, and you have to have like a little tool to do it. And my dad didn't. He goes, so he pulled out the number 1 plug, and he'd have me like hit the starter like every like for a second, and then he put this piece of tissue in the spark plug hole, and then like it popped, and it like when it popped the tissue off, that's when the piston's at top dead center. It goes right there, don't touch it anymore, and then you can move like the timing chain. I'm just like, how do you know all
That's crazy
stuff, man? Yeah, my dad has a 3rd grade education. Like it's very sad when I think about it, but then I stopped being sad really quick, and I said, you know what, man, you did all of this with so little, and I am so proud of you. Like my dad grew up extremely poor, like dirt floors, like no electricity or running water. Like I mean, like he's the oldest of six kids, and it's like I admire all of them. They're very hard. They but they're driven. Like all of them are driven. Like all of them are like so like talented. Like they all can do certain things. Like they all have each very unique thing that they can do. Like and I love every single one of them. Like they in their own right. Like for the way they are. My dad the most, of course.
Yeah, of course. Are they all here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank God. Like they're still here. And they've all worked in like various places and had various uphill battles, but I've never heard, that's one thing that I do admire about my dad. Like we were poor for a long time and we struggled, but my dad was a very proud man. My dad never took any handouts, never took anything, man. Like he just that he said that's not how you do things. Like a man, stands up for his family. And if one thing he told me as a young kid is I was kind of getting older, and he goes, like he always had a lot of wise things to say. Like my dad never like really would sit down and, like I said, tell me they love me or hug me and tell me these things, but he always tried to like give me advice that would be even more beneficial to me. Like, he said, hey, anyone can make kids. He goes, but try raising them. He goes, that's a real man. He goes, bring them up. He goes, work, get up. He goes, and when no one's watching, to see what you're doing, and like, he goes, you got to get up for them. Like, you have no choice. You can't just sit around. And those things that he instilled, like, that's what, people have told me is like, man, you're retired and you're still kind of like wanting to do things. I said, I don't know. I just don't know any other way. Like, that's just kind of the way I was brought up.
So, what age did you start actually like going into the border patrol?
I joined the border patrol, so that's the second part of that story. So my sister, my older sister, she's a year older. She was the first of our entire family to go to college. So she started at junior college, and then she one day, like, I was working in like a dead end job. I was working like I was working at a rice mill. I mean, I called it like, it was brutal. Like, it was like just flat out brutal. We would grind rice into flour, exported to Japan, and it was like 90-pound bags, and we would do like, I don't know, like 20 pallets a shift, and it was like 4,000 pounds a pallet. You do the math, that's like you'd load a whole semi by hand, like, on these pallets. And man, like, I felt like my arms got elongated 3 to 4 inches, just like carrying those bags like all day long. And then my sister, she came home from junior college, and she was like, hey, you're not staying here. You're not staying in this town, and you're not going to, like, be nothing. And she showed up with like a flyer, and it had the border patrol logo on it and stuff. And it was just like a really, like, it was something like that I would make right now with a pencil. I mean, the flyer back then was crazy. It looked cheesy. It was just like, look, at it was handwritten, and it said like, hey, take a test. And then I filled out the testing part. And then, next thing I know, like, hey, you got a written test in Sacramento. I was like, okay. So I, drove to Sacramento, passed, there was like 500 people in there, people with suits on and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh. Cause at the time when I went in, which is 1995, or actually it's before that, cause I applied like in 1993, and the military was downsizing. So all these military people with a lot of experience were, going for these jobs. I mean, I was just a young kid. Like, I was 18, 19 applying. I had no real experience, and I applied and I passed. There's like, who's fluent in Spanish, and there was like 2-part tests, which are super brutal. Like, they have an artificial language test that you have to do, and a lot of people have a lot of trouble with it. And then I claimed fluency, so I passed the test, and then I had to go in front of a border patrol station in Stockton. It was a Rough and Ready Island, and I didn't even know the border patrol had a station in Stockton. And so I show up on this in Stockton. I passed the Spanish fluency, and then I do everything else. I do the background and all that, and then I get a letter in the mail. Like, Bill Clinton was the president at the time. That he's like, he put a hiring freeze like on all federal jobs. So like, my application sat there from like 1993, and like, I was like, I go back to working in the rice mills, and then
Come on.
2 years go by, and then I get a letter like, hey, you want the job? And I'm like, what? Like, I'd already totally forgot about it. And
Really?
then, yeah, the letter showed up saying, hey, do you want the job? And
You weren't applying for anything else? Any other like law enforcement stuff?
I did. California Highway Patrol like 2 times, Sacramento Sheriffs. Who else? Gosh, and then I think I did LAPD. I did LAPD and LA Fire. So then I get hired, and then that, I had a stack of just like rejections from everybody. LAPD and LA Fire never really responded back. So I just figured, well, so I went to the border patrol so I got hired, showed up to San Diego in June of 95. And my sister was there. My brother-in-law were living there. So that kind of helped. And then my brother-in-law takes me like the day that I have to enter on a duty, like at 4 a.m, like drops me off in front of this like MIB building with like no signage on it or anything. Like, I'm sitting on the street corner and like trying to figure how to get in there. And then I see another guy show up later, and then a couple other guys. Oh, I'm in the right place, like. So ended up, they put us on a detention bus where they put all the prisoners and all that stuff.
Oh my gosh.
So we get up there, and like, I'm thinking we're gonna get like first rate service, man. And they roll up in a detention bus, put us all in there,
Shackled?
roll us down. What's that?
Shackled in there.
Yeah, no, no shackles, but they just like all that stuff was still on the floor. I'm just like,
Yeah.
dang, what like well, it's like, what if like this thing would have rolled over, catch fire? We're gonna get out of here. Everything's like. So they drop us off at the San Diego airport, and then we show up to Glencoe, Georgia. Well, we fly into Florida, and I can't remember what part of Florida we flew into, but then we drove down. We show up like all the military things you see, like we show up in the middle of the night, like it's all like choreographed, man. We show up like at midnight, like you're so tired of traveling all day, and then they let you have it, man. They give you the business, man. Like the drill instructors show up, man. Like all their stuff's like shined up, like squared away. They come out, and I'm like, this is my first time away from home. Like I'm 20 years old, and my buddy who I was sitting with next to, he was in the Marines. He goes, just stay right next to me, man. He goes, do not. He's like, just go with it. Do not like question anything. He goes, you're gonna find yourself in big trouble if you do. And they had all these like yellow steps on the floor and stuff, and like what did they call it, heel to butt cheek, man, like like toe to heel, and like you had to like line up, like, and man, they gave it to us, man. Guys walking by like yelling so loud, like spitting at us and stuff, it's like I could like feel someone like spit from like how long. And at that very moment, man, like it just sunk in, man. I was just like, holy crap. I was like, what did I get myself into? Like, this is probably not a good idea. And sure enough, man, like it was brutal, like the first couple of days, and I bombed like the first like 2 tests, and then I call my dad. The first person, I call my dad, and there's no cell phones back then. They had like this crazy like pay phone system that you'd have to set up, and I call my dad, and I actually, like, to be honest with you, I started like tears rolling down my face. I'm crying. I was like, hey dad, I don't think I can do this. It's too hard. I already failed like 2 of the tests. And then he said, and even just thinking about it's like really hard to bring up, but he said, what did I, he goes, why did I kill myself in the field? He goes, why did I work all those hours? And man, it was like, he goes, if you come back here, you're gonna come back to nothing. He goes, you have to finish. He goes, you're gonna thank me. He goes, in 25 years, you're gonna have your whole life ahead of you. He goes, you'll have a pension, insurance. You'll have everything you ever wanted, everything I ever wanted. He goes, but you got to get in there. He's like, you've been through worse. He goes, just remember what I'm telling you right now. He goes, you will have nothing if you don't make it. And man, that like just sunk in, like to hear that from like the person who has the most impact on me to tell me that. And I said, you know what, you're right. And from that moment on, like I just like buckled down, studied, did everything I had to do, like all, and it was true. Like my dad was like, he says, can they put their hands on you? And I'm like, well, not really. He goes, can they like punch you? Can they hit you? And I'm like, no. He's like, well, then it's nothing that you can't deal with. He goes, doesn't matter what they make you do. He's like, you can deal with it. And he was right. He was right. It was just like that uneasiness and like fear, really, of the unknown that like was really like grabbing hold of me.
Yeah.
And then just to hear him say that, it was just, and I get it. Like when I look back at the academy and I think about like how they do things or why they do things, they're testing your resilience, man, because you're going to be in situations where like things are not going to go good, and it could go really bad. And I think when you're there, you don't really see that, and you're like, oh, this is so hard unnecessarily. Or for people that have never been in law enforcement, I think when they see that, they're like, oh, that's just unnecessary. Like, no, everything that is, to me, in my opinion, like all the things that they did and the way that they did it, I wouldn't change a thing. None of it.
Well, I mean, talk about resilience, talk about composure. Like we talk about the fact that like the academy has changed so much, even to today. Like it's changed. It's not as hard, I'm sure, as it what used to be. And everyone says that. I think every generation says that. But I think about the times that like even like doing like riot control recently, up to the last couple of years, and you can stand on a line and be yelled at for hours. But the whole idea is that you have to be professional, maintain composure, not do anything rash. Like you have to, keep your eyes open, look around, see what's going on, make sure no one's gonna get hurt. Right. And that's where the training comes from. It comes from that basic academy training of beginning, like you said, getting screamed at, but you're maintaining your composure and you're not, and you're like looking straight ahead and you're okay. Like mentally you have to be okay to be able to deal with it, because you're going to deal with it and then you're going to deal with that situation, or like you said, even worse when you're out there in the field.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree with you. Like, I don't think it should change. I think you need that. I think you need to be broken down a little bit to see that you're able to hold on to that, because people are going to leave. People who can't handle it, you said, maybe you're about to leave, people will leave.
Yeah.
And
At
yeah,
that time, I think we had like a 35% attrition rate out of the academy. I think it was about 35%. And if the law didn't get you, I mean, when you would get there, like the law, I mean, they'd stack like books, like you couldn't barely see over the top of like the tops of the books. You have to like look around it to see your instructor. And I'm just like,
right.
he's like, gosh, I don't remember how many weeks it was, 26 weeks, 28 weeks to put all this in, and then people like that were not non-native Spanish speakers had to learn like Spanish. Like I think they equated it to like 2 years or 2.5 years of Spanish in college. Like
Really?
that's in that short amount of time. Like, and you're putting a lot of pressure on, people that don't speak Spanish, or people that, like you said, like all these different scenarios, if one thing won't get you, another one will. If the physical does, the academics will, like, and that's not where it stops. You still got like scenarios, you got like and then you got to be able to be proficient with a gun, and I was lucky. I ended up being just a natural shooter, and I loved guns, but the academy like definitely like made me really,
Yeah.
really like respect them and learn how to use them. And I appreciate all the training that I got.
I don't think I ever knew that the Border Patrol I mean, I understand why they put emphasis on Spanish, but I never knew that they would make you guys learn that in depth. If you
Yeah.
didn't already know it, I mean, it makes sense. You should know. You should understand what's going on. But I didn't. I don't think I ever heard that.
Yeah, that's one of the like really hard parts that people don't understand about the academy is our Spanish program is like so like. And then I later went back like 6 years later after being in the field. I went back to be a Spanish instructor, so I got to sit on both sides. And I it was a lot better going as an instructor. We had a lot of fun, but I could see like the stress and fear in like the new recruits' faces when you're teaching them stuff. And I did firearms, later became a firearms instructor, and and I went back to teach that, and that was a lot of fun too. Like I loved teaching firearms. I loved teaching those things. And I remember there was one case in point that sticks out like out of everything. And so we would help out, like we look like a sea of red out there, because like when you're in the academy, it's like a 1-to-1 ratio. So for every shooter, there'll be like 50 shooters out there. You got a 1-to-1 guy right behind you. Yeah. And that's only for a certain part until they develop into like go into like certain different levels of whatever we're teaching, like basic marksmanship. Like that's like 1-to-1, because some people have never handled a gun.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you would be with your own class, and then you'd help out with another class because there was that many people coming in. I mean, we had classes, waves of 50 people coming in every week. Like every week we had 50 people coming in. So it's just like waves of agents coming in at the time. So I got to help out with another class, and everyone kind of knew, like when you kind of like size your recruits out, and you kind of like, okay, I'm gonna like line up behind this guy, right? So I was late to kind of like line up, and I ended up getting this guy like on the middle. And then I'm just like, I'm like, so they're doing like stress fire, so they're like doing all kinds of stuff where it's like quick draw and stuff like that, and this guy's like really late out of his holster. He's like firing like off, like buzzer goes off, and like 2 seconds later he's like firing. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? I go, listen to the commands. I go, can you hear him? He goes, yes. And he's like, he wouldn't look over at me. He never made eye contact with me. So I was just like, what is wrong with this guy? And then he'd like reholster, and then they'd go faster and faster, more rounds, and he'd be like more out of control. And I'm like, dude, you need to stop. I go, you're gonna end up shooting yourself. So someone sees me like in his ear, like giving him all kinds of instruction, and then someone taps me on my shoulder, and then like I saw his hand, like once he like they made him draw out, it's like his hands were like shaking like crazy. I'm like, well, maybe I'm pushing this guy too much. Maybe I'm stressing him too much. And then the guy goes, hey, that guy, he goes, another instructor came, he goes, that guy right there that you're talking to? I go, he shot himself in the leg like the day before. And I'm like,
oh my gosh,
like he like shot himself like in the leg. He goes, well, he shot himself through his pant, and then in his pants they carried these red like felt markers, these big ones, and he hit the felt marker, it blows up, it sends ink everywhere. The guy thought he shot himself in the leg, but it was the ink from the
on.
marker. and he missed his legs. So, but nonetheless, he's like traumatized, like
Well, yeah.
so then I get him the next day and I'm jumping on him, and it's like I was like, oh crap. I was like, man, okay, I better chill out, man. This guy's gonna end up shooting himself for reals in the leg, or myself.
Yeah.
So those experiences like that, I mean, I think he ended up making it, but just, I mean, like I said, it's like one thing after another, man, when you're there.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, can you imagine? Like, yeah, he's freaking out in his head, like I'm gonna accidentally shoot myself again or whatever.
Yeah.
And then and you're you're trying to teach him, you have no idea. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's nuts. Like, you know,
So you were in San Diego this whole time at that point, or were you had already gone
so
to Arizona?
no, I was in San Diego for about 11 years, about
Were
10,
you
11 years.
were you flying out to was the academy in Florida?
It was in Glencoe, Georgia was
Georgia.
our, oh, so when I went to the academy, it was in Glencoe, Georgia. Then they moved it to Charleston, South Carolina. So that's where I went to teach Spanish.
Got it.
And then they would move several years later, it would move to Artesia, New Mexico, where it's currently now. So those are the three spots that I was part of. There was previous spots before I came in. Like one, I think right before I came in, it was called the Alabama 500. And they're notorious, like they're known. I think all of them are probably all retired now, but like they used a military base like in Alabama, I think, and they put like 500 agents there, and they said it was just crazy. Like that's where they held their academy until they got their own place in Glencoe, Georgia.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So when you were in San Diego, what was your basic duty? Were you doing actual border like check-ins, or what were you doing?
Yeah, no, you were on patrol. Like we had ATVs, horses, and our vehicles. You figure I got there in 95, so the station only had like, I think when we got there, I think it only had about 100 agents. I think it wasn't very big. They patrol 5 miles of border, so which is very small. So it's from San Ysidro port of entry, and it runs out all the way to the beach, like all the way to the water. And when we got there, like I was working in the evening, so 6 p.m. and then you had 6 p.m. to 2 p or 2 a, and then you had the midnighters that would kind of overlap in between there. On 6 p at that time, I think we were doing like about 2,000 apprehensions a shift. And then we were losing. Yeah, we were doing about 2,000 apprehensions a shift. And I think, honestly, in all honesty, I think we were catching about 20%.
Really?
Yeah. So we were getting completely blown up every night, like, and it was relentless. Like every night, as soon as the sun went down, like that's it. Like everything, like the whole border came alive, man. I mean, you had people like running up the freeway. You'd have like they used to call like these bonsais, and you'd have people running up the freeway like 100 at a time. And you have cars driving, 60, 70 miles an hour into Mexico, like from the US, and these people running the opposite way in those lanes. I mean, you can only imagine like the amount of people that would get killed, hit, like, and then, we would be out there trying to like, arrest these people. They'd jump just cross the freeway. I mean, go into like neighborhoods and homes, and like, so it's just all the nonstop. I mean, like, it's just crazy.
How do you deal? I mean, how many agents are out there that you're getting 2,000 people a day that they're apprehending 2,000?
On a shift, I think we're only maybe like on a shift, maybe like 50 of us. And you'd have a guy that would put down, I mean, like arrest. I'm not saying like you'd shoot anybody, but like you'd put down, like you'd be up on an area by yourself. You'd have like, it wouldn't be uncommon to have like 60, 70 people by yourself on the ground. One guy.
Who's when you're taking these people, where do you take them, and how do they, like, who does the processing? Because you can't be out there doing all this work and doing processing.
No, so you'd have agents like they were back at we do our own processing. So you'd have our own intake. So you'd have like 4 agents or 5, 6 agents at the station, and they'd come in these tanks. And we had like 2 vans, 2 of these old Chrysler vans that sat like 20 people in them. You literally had to like overload these vans to keep up with the amount of people that they're arresting, because so we would put people in these tanks, and these tanks are only made to hold like, I don't know, maybe like 300 people. And then and the bosses would be like, you got to put them in there, and we'd have like double the capacity, like that was supposed to be in there. I mean, nowadays, I mean, people probably go to jail for that, like for doing that, like, but there was like no choice. You'd have people sitting where the buses would drive up, like in the Sallyport area. You'd have hundreds of people standing out there, like because all the tanks were full. And then you'd have all those guys like processing these people, like inputting their names, like bio data, whatever. And then like it would just depend on the U.S. attorney on like how many entries that person had before they would go, prosecute them. A lot of at that time we were just catching people, sending them back to Mexico, and then come right back. And we were doing that for like years.
Would you see the same
And
people over again?
oh yeah, you'd see people like 20, 30 hits, like
Really?
recidivist hits. So they'd come back in like over and over. Then you see the smugglers that they would get in there. I mean, it's just nonstop, nonstop. And you would be out there sometimes and you would just be like, you'd be on the ground with 10 people and you'd watch like 80 people running down the road, and you're just like, we need help. Like
Yeah.
somebody come help us. And for years, nobody cared. It was nobody cared about anything that we did. We had vehicles that barely ran. At that time, the Border Patrol was married with the Immigration and Naturalization Service. So that's the branch that actually makes people citizens.
Right.
So they were married with us, and we were like they called us the redheaded stepchild. Like I mean, we very rarely saw any of the money that was allotted to go to us. We like our vehicles were trash, like our equipment was trash, like training was trash. And I'm not saying the guys that were putting on the training is trash. I'm just saying like compared to what we should have been getting, the
Right.
amount of money and resources, like the guys and girls were doing the best they could, but like somebody was keeping all the funds away from us. Like we never got anything. And that didn't change until like, later on when they broke apart. INS went a different route, that we were separated from them. But for years, we never got any money.
That's crazy. Did you stay on patrol in San Diego the whole time?
Yeah, so I was in San Diego for, like I said, the 10, 11 years. I stayed on patrol. I jump on details. Details were like things that you could do collaterally, like I went to the academy to teach 1 year. I taught Spanish, gave myself a little break off that, came back to patrol, and I did firearms. I got certified in firearms and became an armor for the Border Patrol. So
Oh, that's
got
cool.
to be yeah. So then I got to be at the indoor facility that we had there at the Naval Training Center in San Diego, and I did that for like three years. And then after that, in between that, I just started going on details, like um before, like what you see now in the news, like in like McAllen sector in South Texas, Del Rio, all that. I got to go there like in 1999, and we had no money. Same scenario, no money, no people, and the situation was just as bad back then. Like they would put one guy on the line to keep an eye out with binoculars, because that's about the best you had at that time. And then the next guy down from me was like a mile or two. So you couldn't even see, like in between that area. They have that blade grass in Texas. So they'd come across the Rio Grande River, and if you'd see a movement or maybe a seismic sensor go off, then you have to go off of that, and then you'd get another guy to help you out. And I mean, it was complete chaos down there. I mean,
It
crazy.
sounds crazy.
It's like the Wild West down there. And then Douglas, Arizona was that way. Like, it was weird because once, like after 4 years at San Diego, we were able to control, somewhat slow down the flow in our area, and it kept pushing it out east. So the next area they got out of control was like El Centro. I don't know if you're familiar with where that is. Like it's basically like by
No.
Yuma, Arizona.
Okay.
So that area blew up too. So that area was just barren desert out there. So that, like, you'd have like just thousands of entries out there. So we went out there to work and help them shore it up, and then it ended up going like to Douglas, Nogales. So I just kept taking details and working at all these different areas. And as a young agent, I mean, that's amazing to see all these different places and work, and see how every station does everything a little bit different. um
Was it so I'm imagining like the people trying to get across the board, like running from you guys. Was there any
yeah.
people that were try to engage with you that would, as far as like firearms, or people who actually wanted to fight?
Yeah, there'd be a lot of that. There'd be a lot of that, especially like when at that time the big thing was, obviously marijuana was very, very big at the time. All that kept coming across the border. Anytime you'd have a vehicle that was coming across the border, or in our area in San Diego, it was mostly vehicles, and that was always a very risky situation, because they only had to get within a couple of miles, within like 3-4 miles, they're already into like a city area. and that posed a big problem because you'd have like, vehicles trying to run over agents, shooting at them. I mean, just all kinds of stuff, or doing draws or doing plays. Like, I mean, a lot of the stuff was choreographed, like, like what we would call like a suicide vehicle. They'd send a suicide vehicle through the border and it has like all these drugs in there. Something that seemed too easy. And that ties up like, 10 guys. Well, 10 guys at that time is probably almost the entire shift. And then what happens down the road, like another part of the wall would be cut, and then they'd send another truck with like 2,000 pounds in it going up the freeway. And it was like that all the time.
That's crazy. How many were you guys aware of that kind of stuff? So you'd see the suicide vehicle or whatever, would you be like, hey, this is going to be something else might be going down? And would you have some, like, do you guys have other kind of services like helicopters, anything to like check this out? The other areas?
At that time, like everything that we had back then was like Vietnam era base. Like our helicopters back then were, I think they called them a Loach. It was like a Hughes 500 or something. It was just like the Magnum PI helicopters, these little like Loaches. Yeah. And that's all we had. And we had like, I don't know if they had FLIR back in. Yeah, they did have a FLIR, but it was very like the early stages of like the infrared and and then the small helicopters. But we'd have one or two that covered the entire San Diego County. We had stations up in Temecula, San Clemente, like all those areas wouldn't get the same support that the border got.
Yeah.
So
what made you decide to switch over? Well, go ahead. What are you saying?
It was just crazy, like how much we did with very little.
Yeah, I think that's what we're in this era too now. It's like it feels like we're getting less and less as far as resources go, or people, personnel, like less and less these days. And how are we gonna solve these problems with less people?
Yeah, and I think that the current climate now, like when I came in, I mean, like I told you, like when I came in, there was definitely a different climate to how people perceived law enforcement and how we were treated. I'm not saying we were treated good or anything, but I think there was a sense of like we had that understanding or that mutual respect, like between the public and people in uniform.
Yeah.
And then now, like I feel that too much has been placed on criminals. Like everything, criminals have rights, criminals have this, criminals that, and people forget that, like, if you're having contact, for the most part, my experience, even as a kid, if you're having contact with police, it's usually because you're either around something, or maybe someone, you're in the wrong place, or maybe you're doing something that is drawing yourself to that. You're not 100% innocent. Like even myself, like if I were to get pulled over, okay, he didn't just pick me out of the air to pull me over. He's like, hey man, you're going kind of fast. Like, where are you headed? So I'm obviously doing something to warrant the contact. And I think
I always thought that was
now,
interesting too.
Yeah, I think that now that like nowadays, if you have any kind of contact, it's like, oh, how dare you like pick me out and all this stuff. And now law enforcement is being made to be like the villain. I go, yes, don't get me wrong. Like in my agency, there was a lot of bad guys. And there was a lot of just bad people, And I knew who they were. Like I just stayed away from them. I didn't work around them. I didn't associate with them, and there was a lot of racist people where I worked, and that was a tough part, like biting my tongue, because there's a very thin line, like there, you definitely don't want to be in a position where people are questioning like your loyalty to the other people you're working with. And I think that's something that, thankfully, when I was in my career, that I never had a problem anybody questioning my loyalty, and the people that I chose to work around followed the same rules. And
you're saying people were racist within the department?
Yes.
That you worked around?
Yeah. And that was tough, man. That's tough to deal with, especially being Mexican, like Mexican. And then, a lot of our command staff, was, majority was white. But not all of them were bad though. Like I had a lot of like good supervisors. I had a lot of good, like, captains or, supervisors, and you had like PICs that were really good, chiefs that I got along well with. But there was, anywhere you go, there's going to be bad people. But I think now the current climate, everyone's just focusing on like the one bad guy, whatever, like my buddy used to, or one of my old training officers said, You know, if you're expecting someone to pat you on the back when you do something good, you got another thing coming. I was like, you know, stars in my eyes, like shiny, my uniforms pressed. I'm thinking like I'm going to save the world. And he goes, but he said, step in shit once. And he goes, and you're going to have that stench on you for the rest of your career. He's like,
Yeah.
so be very careful on what you do. And I don't know, just that I just see it now. And I mean, I feel bad. I feel bad for anybody who's in law enforcement now. And because I wore the badge and the gun for a long time and I did the job the best I could. And that's one thing my dad always reminded me is like, hey, you know, because a while there, like all the adversarial things that I was dealing with were getting to me. And I was like, you know, I'm going to quit. And then my dad was like, if you quit and you leave that position, he said, someone else behind you is going to pick up where you left off the same or be as fair as you. He goes, so you have to remember that. He goes, you do your job, you do it the best you can, and that's all you have to just be fair. That's all you got to do. And that's kind of the way I've tried to that's kind of the way I went about my career, you know. And when I would catch somebody like, you know, smuggling drugs, like just because they had the drugs in their car and stuff like that, like yes, I'd give them a business, arrest them, give them a third degree, whatever I got to do. And if we had to go hands on, we went hands on. Like it was, you know, whatever the person's response dictated how I responded back to handling that. But when it's all said and done, like I would always use those moments like to talk to the person. Like I would be like, why are you doing this, man? You're young. Like you know, I wouldn't just like, and I was doing this way back then. No one was telling me to do it. I don't know, maybe I saw a little bit of myself in these people, like, you know, hey, you know, trying times, you know, you do things, you make bad decisions. Um, and I would just tell them like, hey man, you're gonna like, I don't know what's gonna happen to you here. I would tell them, I said, I don't know how much trouble you're gonna get into. I said, but I go, if you are able to get out of this and later fix your life, I go, don't throw it away, man. Don't throw it away. I said, these decisions will ruin your life forever. And that's what I would try to take moments to do that, you know, to talk to the people that were actually getting in trouble. I'd say, like, you're in trouble. The guy who sent you to do all this, I go, that guy's at home. I go, he's making money. I said, but you're the one out here arrested.
Right.
I go, now what? And that's kind of like I'd always do that throughout my career.
I think that's good. I mean, you're not just showing mentorship to the people you worked with, but the people that you're having impact on the community. I mean, I think that without maybe even knowing you were doing it at the time, I mean, maybe you just like, it was just natural for you, but thinking back on it, I think you probably recognize that you probably made a lot of difference to several people you dealt with.
Yeah. I mean, I just felt like, well, you know, they're people. At the end of the day, they're people. And that's what I think people are forgetting, that like police officers, border patrol agents, whoever's wearing a gun and a badge, I think people are forgetting first and foremost that they're people. Like they're no different than you. And the only reason why people now can say so many things is, you know, it's easy to get behind a keyboard and type away and like say all these things about videos and things that they post. But, you know, it's funny, like when you see like reporters or people like get put in a situation, like even just a mock situation, how fast they screw it up. And then like they get a break because like, hey, they weren't trained or whatever.
Right.
But the person who screws up and makes the bad decision, like in that one split second, like they don't get a do-over, you know, like their career's over or they're going to jail or, you know, whatever. And that was one of the big reasons why I got out. I got out of the, you know, I could have did 10 more years. And
really?
the other reason was my kids, you know. Yeah, I could have did 10 more years. And I ended up being a canine handler for the last 9 years of my career. And that was probably the most revigorating of like my entire, like, that was probably the best time of my entire life
as
an agent.
So is that why you went over to Arizona, because the canine, or did you go there before?
Oh, no, I left before. I left before because I couldn't afford to live in California anymore. I bought a house in La Mesa, and at that time, I didn't remember what I paid for it, but it was astronomical, like property taxes and everything was like, you know, and they pay us well there, but regardless of what they pay you there, the cost of living is astronomical. Unless you have a partner that makes, you know, same as you, you know, you're probably not going to do very well.
So cost of living is why you really ultimately left.
Yeah.
How did you get into canine? Was that a difficult process, or was it something that you had to like put in for?
Yeah, it's really hard. It's super hard to get into. At that time, the process has changed since, but like I started out when I transferred from San Diego to Arizona, I went to Naco, Arizona, which is like between Douglas and like southeast of Tucson, small little town or small little station. And then from there, I transferred to the Casa Grande station, and the Casa Grande, Arizona station is like south of Phoenix. It's kind of a weird location. I think it was built in that station was built in the 80s or 70s, maybe. I mean, it had multiple locations, but I think it was meant to be like an interior station. And so from that station, that's where I finished my career. So that's a 110-mile drive from the station to the border every day, 5 days a week. So, and
That's crazy.
When you think about it logistically, that makes absolutely no sense, like to do that. I mean, but it's the government, man. Like I tell you, like that makes no sense, but that's what we did. And so once I got to that station, I put in for a canine spot, and you have to, cut a memorandum, put all your experience or your wants and why you want to do it. And then finally I got selected, and then they gave me an option. They said, you can do homeschool, which is like, you basically go down to our sector in Tucson, and you have like an instructor who's already certified, and he'll put you through the school, and you get to go home. Like I get to like actually drive myself back to my house. And I said, no, I want to go. I want to earn it. I want to go where everyone else has had to go before me. And they're like, oh, you're gonna have to go to El Paso. You're gonna have to go to Fort Bliss. And like, dude, it's a hellhole. I'm like, I don't care. Like my parents live there, and I want to go. So okay, so they sent me off, and you go there, and man, what an eye-opening experience, man. You get in there, and like this is at the climax of like Caesar Milan, like doing all these crazy things with dogs and making them do whatever he wants. And we get in there, and then the instructor gets up in front, and he's like, or one of the main guys in charge, and he's like, how many people watch Caesar Milan? And like everyone's raising their hand. They're like, well, forget that shit. It's like, this is reality right here. He goes, they don't show you all the outtakes. They don't show you all the things he has to do. He goes, and then he's like, we're going to put this on. I go, this is the reality. And then they put on a video of like a 2-minute video where a handler has a Belgian Malinois, and like, he's got his shirt off, which is crazy. So he's just got his uniform pants on, and he's got no like dress shirt on, or no top shirt, just like an undershirt on.
Yeah.
And like they got like a ring of agents in this like open area, like in a smooth cement area. And they get this dog out, and it's got like a Cujo, like a Bane, like the Batman Bane mask on, his muzzle. And I'm like, holy crap, like what are they gonna do? And then this guy's a big dude. Like the agent that's in there without the shirt, he's got like, or with the cover shirt, he's like, I don't know, he's like 6 foot, like 6'1", a big dude. And then this dog's, I don't know, he's about 80 pounds, 70 pounds. And then they're like, get ready. They're like, get ready. And then all these guys are around. I'm like, what's going to go on? And they let the dog go, and the dog like comes up at him and like tries to like bite him through the muzzle. And then it was his dog. That dog that they were doing that was the agent's dog. So this is like a last resort to get the dog to be a dog that you can work with, and that's called an alpha roll. And pretty much, man, this guy wrestles with this dog on the ground. Like the dog would pop back up, he would put him down. I mean, he ripped his shirt, it like drew blood with his nails. Like he ended up being on top of it, and then he was like growling in this dog's ear. And I'm just like thinking, like, what in the world is he doing? And the supervisors who have a lot of experience at this, like they're the actual, like the elite trainers of our canine program, they would tell them like how much to let off and to hold them down. And like, man, this dog, like this went on for like 2 minutes, and this dog is like staring at him right in the eyes, right? Like he wish he could kill him. And then finally he kind of like, you see him kind of start to like let up a little bit, and then he turns his head away from his handler. And he's like, okay, start to let him up slowly. And then as soon as he started to kind of let him up slowly, he locked back on and was like growling again. And when they told him to put him back down, all that happens. And finally he's able to control the dog. So he gets the dog, they put him in the truck, and they're like, so they stop the video, and everyone's like, eyes are like wide open.
Yeah, no kidding.
They're like, anybody want to leave? The door's right there, And I think a lot of people like looked around and like,
anybody leave?
Crap. Yeah, no, at that time, no, because you don't really know, like,
yeah, you're like, oh, I can still do it. Oh, I can.
Yeah, yeah. And then the main guy comes up, and they kind of do like this weird thing where you walk up, and the guy asks you like, hey, what station you from? Going here. You have any kids? Yeah. How old? He would ask you like these random questions. And then there was a line of guys like just coming up, and he had all these like serial numbers on a piece of paper. And this guy would make a mark, and I guess he was like basically assigning you your dog, and I'm like, oh, that's weird. And then, but man, this guy would be so good. Like he was dead on, like pairing
really
dog with the type of person, like because every station has different type of work. Like some station is predominantly checkpoint, so you're always on the highway. Other stations are mountainous. Other stations are like desert, a lot of like tracking. You would tell him where you're from, and he would know, so he would pick certain, certain dogs. And then my dog was like this one dog that I got, and then I had a nice advantage because one of the instructors that was there was from my station. So he goes, "Oh, I got a dog like handpicked for you." And I'm like, "Oh yes." I'm like, "Yes." I got like the cream de la cream dog, and his name was Tucker.
That's
So I get, and they kind of give you like a heads up, like, "Hey, when you go in there, like, there could be it's a pretty good chance you might get bit when you go in there." And that just immediately, I don't care who you are, how big you are, the fact of getting bit by a dog, if that doesn't like scare you a little bit, you're not human, man.
oh yeah.
I was just in there like just thinking I'm gonna die in here. And then I see him, and I get to his kennel, and then he's pretty big, man. He's about like 80 pounds, 70 pounds, really lean. He's a Belgian Malinois. And then I look up to the top of his kennel, I see Constantine wire up there. I'm like, what is up with this dog? Like, it was the only dog that had Constantine wire at the top of his kennel. And I'm like, and then
How
the
tall was
vet
this cage?
technician was, how tall is the cage? Probably
Yeah.
like 10 feet,
Oh
like
my
10
gosh.
feet. And I had something on top. So I'm like, the vet technician's in there, and she's like, "Oh, Tucker, he's a softie." I'm like, "But why is that up there?" He's like, "Oh, he's an escape artist." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "He'll go up the fence, go over it, and then jump out, and then he'll wait by the veterinarian's door till she gets there."
Come on.
No, true story. And I'm like, "This is my dog." And I talked to my buddy. I'm like, "Are you sure he's good?" He goes, "Oh, he's a hammer, man. He's a great dog. Like, you're gonna kill it with him." And sure enough, like, we start, they after that, after you do a week of that, then there's, okay, now you guys get to take the dog home with you to the hotel. So we're put up in hotels that allow dogs, and you have a crate in there to put them. So everything was going great. And then I went to put him up because I had to go have dinner, and my buddy came over and he goes, "Hey man, all our class is going to go eat dinner. Like, you ready?" I'm like, "Yeah, let me put Tucker in." And then I tell him to kennel, and he like kind of like backs up a little bit. And I'm like, "Oh, we're having an issue here." And then he just like swells up, man. Like, he just like all his muscles start popping up in the back of his shoulders, hairs up, hackling up, teeth. And he didn't want to go into the kennel. He absolutely did not want to go in the kennel. And I'm like, "Dang, like, what do I do now?" And then I'm like, and then he starts like coming at me like he's gonna like tear me up. And I tell my buddy, I go, "Hey," my buddy like opens the door, and he's like, "Hey, Tuck," because we train with the same dogs, like
Right.
in the same area. And my buddy's like trying to come in with the soft voice. So he comes in like opening the door, right? And he's like, "Oh, hey, buddy." And he like lunges and like midair, like almost like bites him in the face. Like, just, you could hear the teeth like clamping down. So he takes his belt off, man. We look like we're gonna go do like a jail fight. So he takes his belt off and like wraps it around his hand, and like we're trying to like I ended up grabbing a stool in the hotel room, and I'm holding the stool out. I got like the pooper scooper like in my other hand, and I'm like fighting off like a lion. He's like
Come on.
fighting we're in there for like 20 minutes fighting with this dog. We're trying to get him in the kennel.
Because he doesn't, I'm
And then
guessing
finally my
he
buddy
does no
comes.
muzzle, right?
Oh no. So he's
Yeah.
all free to go, man. And I'm like, so we end up like in there fighting with him for about 20 minutes. We get into the bathroom. Somehow we corral him into the bathroom. And then my buddy comes up with a great idea. He goes, at the time, I don't think it was great. He goes, "Okay, you're going to distract him with the pooper scooper bathroom. And when you distract him, I'm going to put the leash right on that," because he had his chain on his neck, a choke chain.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to get him right there. And then we're going to like, that's how we're going to get him into like control him. And then you're going to grab the kennel and drop it on him like a box. That was the plan that he came up with. And I go, this dog is going to kill us, man. And he's like, so my buddy gets into the area where the toilet is, and I'm like in the area where the two sinks are. Dog's in there, and he's not having it, man. He's like, "Come in here and I'll kill you both." And we just like, we got to get him in the kennel. Like, he's got to get in there. So then I grab like my buddy, like, so I start like occupying him or distract him with the pooper scooper. It's all aluminum, like solid aluminum. He grabs hold of it and like starts crushing it with his teeth, man. Like, and like he's like bending it. And my buddy like in that one split second, like the dog turned his head and like he puts the leash on him and then he yanks it and he puts his foot on the door jamb and he's like pulling the dog's like yanking back. And then he's like, do it now. So I go and grab the kennel and I drop it on him, man. I mean, so we get that done and we look and we finally like, we look at the hotel room after that. The mattresses were off the bed. The sofa was flipped upside down, like lamps were on the floor. I mean, like a tornado went through there.
That's so funny.
The instructors come in and they're like, what happened? I'm like, bro, you wouldn't go into the kennel. I thought you said this was a good dog. And then so one of the main instructors tries grabbing him out of the kennel and he like tries to take his hand off. And then my instructor who trained him tried getting him and then he tries to bite him too. And then I'm just like, I said, well, I'm the only guy like they could like handle him, I guess. And I said, well, I better be, willing to lose a finger, I guess, or a hand. I go, I don't know what. So I get on a knee and I start to open the thing and I'm praying that he doesn't lose his mind. And he came right out for me like nothing ever happened. Let me put the leash on him and walked out. And in the end, they ended up deciding that he had some sort of like separation anxiety. Like he didn't want to be put up and be left alone.
Really?
So yeah. So he ended up going like to another handler that had a lot more experience, not a new guy. So ended up getting another dog.
Oh, so you
his name was John. No, I got another dog. His name was John. He ended up being like, just imagine like one of those dudes at the gym that's like lifting like those 140-pound dumbbells, like, and then like, hey man, like super big dude, maybe not very bright. Like that was my dog, John, man. He was like a hot rod, he was amazing, man. He's just all muscle. Like when he got to our house, I had to get him a motorcycle tire, a 300 millimeter back tire, and he would grab it. He would grab it in his teeth and hold it straight out like that. Like, I mean, that's heavy. It's a heavy tire.
Yeah.
And he'd grab it and he'd walk by the window, like going back and forth. And that usually meant like, come outside. Like, I want you to swing me around by it. And I'd go out there and swing him around by the thing. And amazing dog, man. Like amazing dog. Like, so I miss him. I have his urn in my closet. And when I go in there to like change and stuff, I'll look up at his picture and stuff. And I can't help but not remember like all the great times we had. Like even the times where we're not so good and like where he bit me or like went crazy or scared the crap out of some sheriffs. Like we had some guys like run out like away from us and he's like, don't you have a dog? And I was like, yeah. So I had him on leash and then he got away from me. And then the sheriffs were like in between me and the bad guys that were out in front running. And one of the guys like screamed so loud, like I'm serious, like it was like bloody murder. And they never let that sheriff live it down. He's like, dude, you sounded like a girl screaming. I go, well, this dog was coming like a bullet. I thought he was going to get bit, but he was going after the other guys. But in the end, it ended up being an amazing dog.
That's cool.
I miss him and great times.
Wow, that's a crazy story.
Yeah, I know that's just one of many, man.
I know people that want to get into canines. I'm sure like it's like they probably don't imagine that part of it, but that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
What year did you retire?
I retired 2 years ago.
Okay.
So was that 2020?
So right before, or was it during the craziness right before it or what?
I think it was right before, like just right before I got like, it just like all hell broke loose right after I left.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. How are you doing now with like now looking back on like your career and all the times you had? I know that you had like a lot of like really good times, but like the challenging times too. So how are you doing now with all of like looking back on it?
Well, I mean, I've lost a lot of like friends along the way and not in a good way. Like, when I started out in San Diego, I think we had 2 or 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 people that had trained us directly. That one of them unfortunately killed himself with alcohol and then passed out on his house and then we had a lit cigarette and then caught the drapes on fire and burned to death. Jeez. Another guy took his own life after going through just a horrible battle with custody, and like he had like I think he was on a morphine drip for like an injury that he sustained at work, and then he ended up taking his life. Another 2, 3, 4 guys like took their lives just unexpectedly. In my career in San Diego, or I'm sorry, here in Casa Grande, I mean, I lost an agent, like, while on duty. He and another agent crashed on dirt bikes, and we were, some of the first people to arrive on scene. And um, I never thought I would have to deal with that. And I'll just touch on that really quick. So we were out on, I was in my Canine truck, and I was coming down the highway, and then I hear one of the younger agents on motorcycle say, "Hey, we need an EMT over here." And then as soon as I hear it, I'm like, "Oh, that's strange." And then I hear, like, within another minute later, like, "Hey, our dispatch, we need a helicopter here, and we need help bad. There's an agent down, and he's hurt really bad." So as soon as those words came over me, and like the hair on my neck stood up, it's like I think I was the ranking, or the senior patrol agent out on duty at that time. So immediately I'm like, from where they were, or from our area where we work, it's about 75 miles from Tucson, which is the next nearest metro area. We're in the middle of nowhere. I mean, literally like 80 miles away from nothing. There's
Bro.
no major hospital, nothing. So I said, you know what? I called the dispatch, and I said, "Hey, this is so and so. I need you to launch the Blackhawk. I need you to launch our Blackhawk right now." It's like, "You need to get them up in the air." And I go, "You need to tell them that we're going to need them over here at these coordinates." So I still don't even know the extent of the injuries that are going on. I peg my truck out. I mean, I'm driving, over, 105 miles an hour going down the freeway. And then I hear, like, "More help. We need more help." So I just, all of, like, another agent getting there, and I'm hearing constant, "We need more help." I'm just thinking, like, man, what could it be? Like, so I finally lead in another group of EMTs that are behind me, some new guys from one of our specialty units, kind of like a police, like SWAT. They were like Borstar. And then we had another, I'm not sure if they were BORTAC EMTs. So they're like from both different wings. So they follow me in, and we get there. And I mean, my brakes were fire. Like, when I hit the brakes to stop to where I needed, I think I kept going like another 200 feet. Like,
Jeez.
my truck wouldn't stop. And I get out, and it's, what you least expect. It's, one bike, two bikes down, and two agents. One agent, crashed into the other one. And that one is like being taken away by another agent. And then just hearing him scream, like, at the fact that he caused that. He felt that he caused it. I mean, it was an accident, but he was screaming, and that just never leaves my head. And so I run over, and there's already, like, it's 115 degrees out. It's like we have no shade trees, nowhere to, like, get under. I move one of the dirt bikes out of the way, like, and then I say, if anybody asks, like, asks who moved it, I go, "It's me." They can blame me for moving it, because obviously it was an accident scene, but we needed room to work, and we couldn't give, like, compressions and stuff. Like, all the stuff was so mangled, so I'm moving
Right.
things out of the way. And so the guys are giving compressions, and, like, one of my good friends is holding his head, and he had sustained, like a massive head injury, like, through the helmet. And so we're holding him, and I'm holding it, I'm talking to him, I'm holding his legs, and then there's a medic next to me, an EMT guy next to me. And then, he's pretty calm. Like, to be honest, like, when I think about it, I was really pissed. I was really pissed at him, because I thought that he didn't care. Like, he was just so calm and telling people, like, what to do, and, like, keep giving compressions. And we had gone through, like, I think, four guys already to that point, like, giving compressions, like,
Yeah.
because it was, you
Well,
couldn't
it
go
wears
very
you
much
out.
because it's
Yeah,
so
it wears
bad.
you out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking, like, big dudes, like, very fit guys. They were pumping, and I'm holding his legs up, trying to keep as much blood up in his, in his prime. Like, but the guy next to me is like, he's giving orders and everything, and then, of course, like, the worst thing happens. I call in the coordinates, I double check the coordinates, the GPS coordinates, because we're in the middle of nowhere. You can't really tell them where to. You got to give GPS coordinates. Somehow the Blackhawk lands in the wrong area. I mean, they get there, like, as fast as they could. I mean, I don't know what the airspeed of a Blackhawk is that we have, but it got there. You could hear him screaming when we got there, but it had already been about an hour, like, us working on the ground on him.
Wow.
So that's how long it took to get to where we were. And then the life flight gets there, the doctor, and the nurse and everybody. So they're able to, like, transport him from the ground where we are to the ambulance that's there. And so they go in there, and they start working on him. And unfortunately, like they weren't able to save him. The doctor comes off, the flight guy comes off, and he says, "Hey, I need to, who's in charge here?" And I said, "Well, this supervisor is, and I am." And he goes, I go, "You can't take him though." And they're like, "No, we don't plan on taking him." And something that I never thought that I would do in my entire career is give someone their last rites. And I said, "You have to let me give him his last rites." I said, "You can't just haul him out of here." And he goes, "Sure, sure." He goes, "We're not going to do anything like that. We want to be respectful." And I said, "We need to get a flag on him." I go, "We need to just all these crazy things like start coming in your head." And then so they take him out, or they pull him back to the back of the ambulance, and they open the doors. There's like 30 guys like around, like all the guys that worked on him, the guys that came off the Black Hawk were like sprinting over, and everyone just took a knee. And um the paramedic looked at me and goes, "Do it, Lozoya, do it." And I'm like, gosh, it just crushed me. Like I just to think about like his family, like praying over the guys that were there, like involved, like um that stuff, like just thinking about it. And I felt for a long time that we had failed him in like saving his life, because so many things that could have went wrong or shouldn't have did go wrong, like the defib, the AED machine to give the shock.
Yeah.
The battery was dead on one of them when we went to use it. The second one was the oxygen bottles, where one was empty and the other one was missing something. That the Black Hawk and the life flight landed in the wrong GPS coordinates, so they had to move over to land where we were. And then the time maybe that it took, like me not maybe calling soon enough, but just all that stuff just weighed on me. And then once he passed, and then I couldn't even go to his funeral. Like I showed up the last, like, once he was already in the ground, I showed up. And um I walked up to the van where they had his mom and dad and brother and sister. And that was brutal for me, because I just walked up, and I had just come off the patrol. And and I said, "Hey," I started speaking to him in Spanish, and I said, "I just want you to know that your son was never alone at any moment. Like, when I go, I had my hands on him the entire time. I go, he was never like in the dirt, like some trash." I said, we took care of him, like every minute, every second. I go, I gave him his last rites." And then his mom, just like his dad, like his dad reminds me so much of my dad. Like, he looks just like him, same build. And then he looked at me, he's like, "Did he suffer?" And God, that's like just like more and more tears kept running down my
Yeah.
face. And I said, "I don't think so. I think it went pretty fast." I said, "But I couldn't tell." And I said, "I thought I did everything I could I said, well, all the guys did what we could to save his life. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we couldn't." And his brother and sister said, "Thank you very much." But I mean, what could I say to his mom and dad, like, at that point, other than, like, that's all I could just do, is reassure them that
Yeah.
he went in peace, and that I didn't let him go without giving him his last rites.
I think that is very powerful. Like the fact that you had to, I mean, going through that is, I can't imagine. I can see you like reliving it right now, just talking about
Yeah.
it. I don't think there's anything you could have said to his family that is going to make them feel any better. I think that like they're gonna suffer and they're gonna feel the pain, and you felt it and you feel it still, and something that you're gonna have to remember as part of your life. I think it's obviously very important to you, like saying that you gave him his last rites and that you were there for him throughout the entire. It's very important to you, and you did that. And I think that by it being important to you, and then like you did that for with your faith and with God, and the fact that like the family knows that you were there the whole time.
Yeah.
I think that is what's important in this, and the fact that like you're recognizing where it's not that you or the people that you worked with failed anything, because I don't think anyone
Right.
failed. I think everyone, it sounds like everyone did everything they could, but you're recognizing certain
Right.
things that were broken in the
Yeah.
process, and
Right.
in the future, hopefully, that's why people checking equipment. We need to check equipment, certain things, and
Yeah.
maintain our stuff, because we don't know when the situation is going to arise where we're going to need it. And you
Yeah. And there
said
was like
all the stuff that's
there was
breaking down.
yeah, and there was like spots, like during the process when we were doing like the our specialty unit, like the guys were brand new, like they had just become EMTs. So like this was one of their first calls to get, and I mean, this is like the last call that you want to be
It's
well
insane.
on anybody, you
Yeah, it's
know,
insane.
any kind of person is someone's like injured like this way. And they were fumbling with the like and the oxygen tanks, I remember, and the guy next to me was calm as a cucumber, man. He was like, hey, he goes, gosh, what did he say? He said something like, settle the F down and do what you were trained to do. Settle down. And like he kind of like set the tone for like the rest of the process. And like,
Right.
you know, because everyone was like flailing. Like, I mean, you know, this is one of our brothers like in you know, hurt so badly. And of course everyone's, you know, jumping over each other to try to like do what they can.
And I think that's
And
different, like when we deal with things, because if it was somebody that wasn't one of the people that you work with,
right.
right? Wasn't a police officer, or wasn't a border patrol agent.
Yeah.
And like we know how to handle these situations. Like we do them every day, right? You go and you have your tools, and this is how you do it, and you handle it, and it's by the numbers, and we
Yeah.
train by the numbers. But then when it's emotional, that's when we talk about like it affecting you, and your brain just shuts down. It doesn't know how to function the same way because it's now your emotions are taking over. But
Right.
and like you said, you saw this guy, and he looks like you're like pissed at him because he's so calm handling
Right.
it. But he needed that. Like he was there for a reason, and he was there to make sure that everyone could actually do their job. Otherwise, who knows what the scene will look like, you know?
And it's funny you say that because we that's one thing that I will give the Border Patrol a lot of credit for is that they solicited a trauma specialist, like someone who shows up like when, you know, and her name is Tanya, and she has a PhD. And I mean, she's been everywhere. The Houston police, the police officer was shot and killed at 9/11. I mean, she's been everywhere. She's very experienced in this. And so she held a like a debriefing for all of us. Like we all sat down kind of like to go over everything. And I remember like, you know, talking about this in front of everybody. And I was the first one to go, and I was angry and I was pissed. I was like beyond pissed.
Yeah.
And I was still like harboring that. And then I looked over at the guy and I said, and then I couldn't even look at him. I pointed to him and I said, and this guy over here, I go, he's acting like he don't give a F about what's going on. And I said, and here we are trying to save our friend, and he's acting like this. And, you know, here I was like dogpiling on him, you know, like not even knowing what his situation was. But then it was his turn to speak. So he went after me. And for some people, this might be something that maybe they don't believe, maybe they don't comprehend or whatnot. But to me, it all made sense. He said, so he was the first EMT to touch him, the guy that was next to me, the guy that I was angry at for not reacting. So he said when he touched him, when he got there, and he had been an EMT for a while already, so he had experience. And he said he was already gone when I got there. And he said, this is exactly what he said in front of all of us. And he said, and he's a Christian, and he said, when I got there and I put my hand on him, I said, I felt something or somebody. He goes, and before he said it, he said, whether you choose to believe it or not is up to you. He goes, I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I'm just telling you what I felt and what I heard. And he said he felt someone put a hand on him and say, it's okay. It's going to be okay. And he felt that was the fallen agent that had already like passed. He said, because he said that due to like his injuries and him getting there, that it was beyond bad. And he said that, and when he said that to me, like he really like released me from my anger that I was harboring towards him, because the whole time he was still like doing everything he was trained to do to save him, regardless of what he had thought he had heard and what he felt and what he already knew with his training that he had passed. He still did it anyway. And that let me off the hook, like not being angry at him. And that really like helped me. And then just talking to Tanya and working through like the trauma of it, you know, and even on my own, I've had counseling on my own, you know, on other issues. And, you know, I think I had to touch on it once, and like on a personal level, just to make sure that I was okay with that. And I think that's the part that I think where all of this ultimately heads is like, I think that agencies now, I don't know, it's just so looked down upon to like take care of ourselves mentally. But the thing is that, you know, there's a book that I had to read because I had to get some pretty like intense therapy. It's called, I think it's called EMDR, therapy. It's like,
Yeah, I've heard of that.
are you familiar with it?
The rapid eye movement stuff. Is that what that one?
Yeah, and they have these things that they put in your hand and stuff, and I had to do it. And the guy that came up with it, I think the book's called The Body Keeps Score, and I think there's no better title than that. Like being in law enforcement, it doesn't matter. Like from the moment you suit up to the moment that you end your career, your mind is recording every little instance of everything you've ever done. And the thing is that when you come home, like now you're expected to be like just like a regular person, like
Right.
and just get along with your kids and your significant other and act like all of that stuff never even bothered you. But the thing is that now you're carrying a lot of stuff inside your head.
Yeah, like I can like hear like that. I just imagine like self at this group and hearing like this guy speaking about it, and I'm just it sounds like it almost sounds like a movie, like the way you're saying it, but it's I feel like emotional about it too. You know, the
Yeah.
I think it's crazy. And then every time when you mention like these stories, my mind, without even thinking about it, my mind starts jumping to things that like I've seen and gone through. Right. And it's like
Right.
you said, like, it's like your mind doesn't forget. Um, I can't imagine going through that, like being that close to someone and losing someone that way. And I think that's, I don't know. I want to like, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know that.
Um, we are pretty long here. I know. I hope everyone stuck around to hear that story. And I'm going to try to emphasize the fact
Yeah.
that you stick around here because I think it's important, and the fact that it's important to the debriefs after the fact are important, and we're just
Yeah.
barely starting that ourselves at our department. That's something that's really
Right.
important to do. I think that we need those things. I think that we need to recognize that people, like, I've had guys come up to me and say, "Hey, we did this debrief. We were forced to do it. I didn't want to go." They tell me, "I'm glad they forced me to go because everybody needs to do it." And it's
I,
how important it is.
yeah, and let me touch on that before we like wrap up. And is that I think that if you don't do that, you're going to let all of these things that you have bottled up inside you manifest in broken relationships, divorces, drug, alcohol abuse, you name it. Like not only just the substance stuff, but also the way that you handle yourself in public around people. And that those you can't expect to go through all these things in this career and not have scars from it. You have to deal with it. You have to like um resolve things, put, you know, maybe sometimes desensitize things. And I'm not saying like forget them or, but in my case, we had to do a lot of work where we changed the emotion behind a lot of things that I had felt as a kid and all the abuse and violence that I didn't exposed to, you know, and a lot of it, you know, was a lot of guilt, carrying around a lot of guilt, like somehow all that stuff was my fault.
And that's all the EMDR
And
stuff, right? Like
yeah,
changing the emotion,
yeah,
right? Changing the emotion related to the
yeah.
incident. Yeah.
And believe it or not, man, the mind is a powerful, beautiful thing. Like when I went in there to have that done, I was the most pessimistic person. I told her, I said, I'm probably the least person that this should be ever done on. I said, because I don't believe in any of this stuff. I don't think any of this stuff is real. And within 5-10 minutes of it, like I felt like we had fractured the inside of like my brain, like to get in deep to things that I didn't even know were like in there.
Yeah.
And it really helped me. It really helped me get to a better place to be a better father for my kids, and hopefully in the future have, you know, longer relationships and be in healthier ones.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's important too. So I was going to ask you what two things. A, I want any advice you'd give to young guys going into the career, which is kind of what you touched on, like handling the situation and like getting help for it. But if you want to add anything else, like any advice or anyone that's going into the border patrol or wants to be in the border patrol, that's the first thing. And then I want to talk about a little bit about your business and what you're doing now.
So my advice to be anyone to be coming into this is you're going to need a good like base, a good foundation to like fall back on. Like you're I kind of think of it like those cars that are really good looking when they get into the destruction derby arena. They look a little rough, but they all run and they're all great. They don't have a single scratch on them. By the time you're done at that first round, like you are going to need people to put the wheels back on, put the door back on, like straighten dents out. Like, and I think for that, you need to, your mom and dad in your life, a good girl or a guy in your life. You need to have positive people. You need to have people that, not just people that are willing to listen, but people that are also going to hold you to some accountability for your person, and to push you, not necessarily mandate that you do something for yourself. You want people that elevate you, that support you doing things for yourself personally. And I tell you, like, even as a new police officer, new border patrol agent, like, going to counseling is not going to make you any weaker. It's not going to make you some sort of like a mindless person or a weak person. And it's taking nothing absolutely away from you. Like, if you need to get help, get it. Because I used to think, just like you guys that are going in, that I'll never need that type of help. I'll never come up against something like that. And it's not true. Eventually you will need help, whether it be personally, for the job. And don't be afraid to seek it, because it will make your life so much easier. Take this advice and don't be afraid to seek out help. And I'm sure a lot of agencies now, whether they offer it within the agency, some of them offer it like through the insurance programs that you can get like a couple of sessions. And believe me, even if it's just a few, like, don't hesitate to do it, because the longer you let something like that linger inside of you, the more destructive it's going to be, and the harder and the more work you're going to have to do to get it out and have somewhat of a normal life when you're done. And lastly, to anybody new, this job should not define you. When you put on the uniform and badge, if that's all you have in life, you're missing a lot of things in your life. Because when you hang it up, there's you need to be your own person. And I think that is one of the biggest things that I have going for myself as we transition into this topic about, like, when I hung up my uniform, like, as I look at all the retirement things that I have in my house and all the memorabilia, they're fun. They were great. Like, I love every minute of it. I laugh about them. I get sad about them sometimes. But the thing is that I understand that part of my life is over. Like, it
Right.
doesn't have anything to do with me anymore. Like, my life now is consistent of being my dad, my kid's dad, making pancakes in the morning, taking them to school, helping with homework. And when that's done, I have me time. And me time consists of going in my shop and working with my new CNC plasma table that I have, that made that sign for you that we talked about. And I do a lot of work with like the VFW, American Legions. Like, I donate a lot of like my pieces for maybe raffles or stuff like that. And
That's cool.
I mean, yeah. So those are things that I like to do now.
So yeah. So your company's name is, you want to say it, Milagro?
Yeah, Milagro Metalworks.
Okay.
Instagram and Facebook for those.
And so you're a welder. You told me you're a welder, right?
Yeah, I can do some welding, but majority of what are all custom signs, like signs, I mean, and brackets, things for like old pickups. We can do just about anything. Like, if you have an idea, and if it can start out as a flat piece of steel, we can make it.
And so on Instagram, your sign is it Milagro Metalworks, or is it something else? I thought it was something else.
I'm not sure if it's on my Instagram. I'll have to send you a.
I wish I could. I want to look at it real quick because I want to make sure we say it right.
Well, here's my card. Here's the card that I have. And then on the back, this is the QR code. I wouldn't even know how to upload something like that. Like,
what is Milagro Metalworks on there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So on Instagram, Milagro Metalworks, if you go on and check out all the stuff that he's doing, he's got signs for 8 different agencies, different companies. Like you said, like your organizations that you're donating to. And the signs are amazing. Like, I'm watching these things being cut and I'm like, oh man, I kind of want I want another one. Like, it's like, I want to, can I modify, I'm like, oh man, I want to do more. Yeah, but they're really cool. So you get like, does it feel like therapeutic being able to go out there and shop and like work?
Oh, it is to me. Like, it's something like, it kind of takes me back to being kind of like a lot younger with my dad. I wanted to be a welder, like, full time. Like, I mean, I wanted that to be my career, but my dad wouldn't let me, because he's like, no, this is not you know, I guess he just was afraid that I would fall into like some manual labor job, and he didn't want me to do that. He goes, I want you to do something else. So he only showed me very little, like how to do it. He wouldn't show me full blown, like how to do it. So
That's funny.
everything I've learned about welding, I've kind of taught myself. Like I took it in shop, like in high school, but it's always been like, if I have to point out something that I'm passionate about, it's probably working with steel and powder coating and just watching it change. I think taking something that's blank, turning it into something, and then you know, grinding it down and resurfacing it, like all of that process, I don't know, it just does something. Like I see why my dad always said that, like, you know, doing stuff and finishing things give you like a big sense of accomplishment, you know,
Yeah,
no matter
absolutely.
how small. And something that I've learned is that, like, and I guess you could apply it to anything in your life, is that when you start out at something, you're going to suck. You're going to suck at it. Like if you start at something, you can't be afraid to start at something, because you might end up being like amazing at it, like, and you're the only person like that's holding yourself back, like you're the fear of failing. And you know, like I've said before, like to me the biggest killer of dreams, like, you know, so like you got to
Yeah,
like
we
be
hold
willing
ourselves
to put
back
it
all the
out there.
time.
Yeah.
You know what's
So
funny is
I've
like making it to me, I'm like, oh, I wish I could know how to work with metal, like and do that. Like I've done little things here and there with like wood and stuff, but nothing like crazy. And I
yeah.
think it's funny because like you're talking about little things that make you feel like, oh, I did accomplish something. Like just getting this
Yeah.
like the podcast on like the
Yeah.
platform was like to me, I was like, wow, I got it on there. It was really cool. And
Yeah, like,
hopefully this episode is better than like the first, 10
yeah,
episodes,
exactly.
as they
Well,
go.
yeah, like my first start into the CNC world was me, like where it almost ended where it started. So I had my table out in the garage. I couldn't, like, nobody told me how to do anything. So I'm out there for 2 weeks. Like I'm out there 14, I think I clocked it at like 12 hours a day, like out there literally on the computer trying to get it to work. And I can't figure out how to get it to work. So finally, when all else fails, I lay down like flat, like crucified on the table, and I'm like, God, baby Jesus, like just help me. Like all I want is just help me, like to figure this out. Like I don't want to sell it. Like I want to do this, and if you help me, I'll do my best at it. And sure enough, like the next day, like I finally, like it just clicked. Like I saw a video on YouTube, and like the guy said to do something, and then it just like poof, like
Yeah.
that. I'm like, are you kidding me? So it was great.
That's so funny. That's funny how our brains work and how we just need sometimes need patience,
Yeah.
like someone bring patience upon us.
Yeah.
That's funny. Well, I think you're doing great work, and I really appreciate you telling us your story today. Um, if you ever want to come back on, I mean, we can talk about anything. Like this is
Yeah.
amazing. Like I think we can. My whole goal is like give people the idea that it's okay. It's okay that we've gone through something and to recognize that, and hopefully
Yeah.
come out and how you deal with it, like how you work through these pain and get on the other side and be successful. And successful, it could be anything, but just being like mentally able to handle your life and be there for your family, be there for your kids, be there for your parents, and just do this life with with everything
And
we
I
deal
think
with.
right now during the current climate, not just in law enforcement, but in general, like we have, kids that are, struggling so much right now. And I can tell you, like from experience, like I'll say this because I can say it now. At age 16, I'm through a lot of grief in my family, like the things that I touched on. And before my career even took off, like a year I was at the highest point of my life. I was a avid athlete in high school, and things just started to pile up, and I thought that there'd be no out. Went through a breakup at school, and I thought that the answer to that was to end my life, and I attempted to end my life at the age of 16. Like ended up going, overdosing on, pills, and getting taken to the local, emergency room, getting my stomach pumped, like being in the ICU for like, 48 hours. And that one event like could have cost me my entire life, like that one thing, like, and thank God, because when I woke up, like it changed our family, like for good, forever. Like it opened my mom's eyes onto like the things that were going wrong in our life. My dad, my sister, my brothers, my older brothers, like, and it also gave me insight onto how much people really love me within my family, and not, I didn't take into account like how many people that I would hurt, and thinking that that would be the answer. And
Right.
I'm here to tell you, those who are watching, like your struggle, no matter what your age is, like you're not alone. Like I've been in those dark times. I walked in those dark clouds, and you as long as you want to, you can. I mean, there's people that will help you. There's people that will like empower you. Difficult times aren't forever. I know it might feel like it, and sometimes that's why people decide to do that, and they lose hope.
Yeah.
If there's anybody in this world that should have lost hope, it was me, a little kid who had, who suffered sexual abuse at a very, very young age, um, attempted suicide at 16, survived that, and went on to have a great 25-year career in law enforcement and raise two beautiful kids and to retire and then to enjoy my life. And I can tell you, like, one bad decision will ruin your life. And especially like, this is what I learned from that at that time, is that someone once told me, a doctor told me, she said, when people decide to do this, she's like, it's a permanent solution to a temporary problem. The problem will not be there forever, but when you decide to take your own life, it is forever.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
you affect so many people around you. And I can tell you personally that I was spared. And I feel that me sharing this right now with anybody who's listening, just know that you can make it no matter what you're going through. It doesn't matter what the struggle, like there can't be any heavier things than the things that I witnessed and was exposed to at such a young age that I couldn't get over. The mind is strong. If you go into people that are trained to help you, trust me, they will get you back right on track. It may hurt, and I equate getting myself straight to walk house and lighting it on fire and walking in knowing that the house is already on fire. But let me tell you, when all those ashes fall down around you, you will have burned off the pieces that you don't no longer need, and the pieces, and you will rebuild yourself into the pieces that you need to put together. And I think that is the one thing that people need to realize, is don't lose hope. Don't lose ever hope in yourself. Don't ever forget that there's people that love you no matter what goes on in your life. You have a lot of people that love you, will do anything for you, and don't ever shut yourself down from those people.
That's great, Carlos. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to exactly how you said that quote about the ashes, and I'm gonna have to write that down and put it in there, because that's really good. And if you're not already doing this, I think that you should be telling your story to as many people as possible, because it's not just like law enforcement. I think that you should be out there, and I think that people will listen and people need it. And I think I mean, I really appreciate having this conversation this morning and you taking the time out of your day to do this. So if you ever need anything,
Thanks,
I'm here. I'm here to talk, and hopefully we can do this again, because this was fun.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Me too, man.
I'm gonna close this. I'm gonna close this out. Anything else you want to add before we close out?
No, man, just keep faith and just keep working, man. Nothing that's good is easy. That's what my dad always tells me. My dad says, like, if it's worth it, it's gonna cost you. And you yourself, whoever's watching this as a person, are worth it. So put the time into yourself. Like, you're worth it. It doesn't matter what anybody says, you're worth it. You can overcome anything, and no one owes you anything. If you believe that you're a victim, you will always stay as a victim. You're not a victim. You're a survivor. You're strong. Believe in yourself and just keep one foot in front of the other. No matter how tired you are, no matter how heavy the problem is, one foot in front of the other. You don't have to run, but just one foot in front of the other, and you'll get there.
I like that. Keep pushing through. Keep pushing through it.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks, Carlos. And that if you want to find Carlos, you can find him at Milagro Metal Works on Instagram. Yep. And you can touch base with him there. He'll make you a really cool sign. Trust me. And if you want to touch base with me on Instagram, it's AP_Sturgeon or Let's Grab a Cup. And you can find me on my website at sturgeonwellness.com or letsgrabacup.com. We're going to hit this closeout music. Thanks again, Carlos. I really appreciate it, man. Let me
appreciate it, man.
Got this music thing. I always takes me a minute. Technology. All right, here we go. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.